As we're recording this episode of Life Talks, there are things going on in California that are catastrophic in nature. There is a series of wildfires that are in the metropolitan Los Angeles area that have been blown into huge firestorms by near hurricane force Santa Ana winds. We're hearing stories of neighborhoods of $1 million homes being reduced to ashes. A lot of celebrities are losing their homes. And, they've been having a very difficult time. As soon as I heard about this, I thought, well, who's going to be there to help? We always know, the government's going to come in and the different agencies that FEMA and so forth. We know that often we hear a lot about Salvation Army in that time, and certainly those are historic institutions, but there is one organization that when disaster strikes, either here in our country or around the world, I know is going to be there, and I know they're going to be good stewards of the resources that are donated. And without a doubt, that is Samaritan's Purse. So I have with us in our studios today, Brian Gresham, and he is the senior regional director of Samaritan's Purse with Church Relations. And he has already given us an episode to talk about Operation Christmas Child. But today I wanted him to talk with us a little bit about the mission and the role of Samaritan's Purse, because truly we saw this in North Carolina just a few months ago with Hurricane Helene coming through and devastating great swaths of our state. The on the ground doing the most work folks that I saw were folks that were developing relationships and assisting people through Samaritan's Purse. Brian, thank you so much for coming in for this episode. Talk to us a little bit about your history with Samaritan's Purse.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me. It's a pleasure to be here. As you introed, Samaritan's Purse is intentional about being at the point of disaster as quickly as we can be to respond to the physical and spiritual needs of people during the most difficult time. And so as a non-denominational evangelical Christian organization, our goal is to meet the physical and spiritual needs of people wherever they're hurting around the world. Samaritan's Purse has been doing it since 1970. I've had the privilege of doing it since 2004, but in all that we do, we're seeking to show and to share the love of Christ and to meet physical needs. And we do it through the local church. That's our mission. That's our purpose, to build up the local church, to meet the physical needs, and to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. Going back to my background, I had the privilege of starting also in a place that's going through turmoil right now in South Sudan. At the time, it was South Sudan. Now where we currently worked and served is technically in Sudan. But we started there managing a bush hospital. It was mostly malaria patients, tuberculosis. We served there for a couple of years, working to build a tuberculosis hospital, school, and a number of other facilities. But we got to there be a part of development in a place that was war-torn, and they continue to be war-torn. That area, part of the world now, certainly requires our prayers because they're continuing to have internal strife in Sudan, and it's affecting the region, especially South Sudan, with millions of displaced people. After doing that development work in South Sudan, my wife and I had the privilege of doing the DART team, International Crisis Response, where we responded to a bad flood in Bolivia and also to the earthquake in Haiti after that devastation in Port-au-Prince. I believe it was 2010. And then I had the privilege of joining the Operation Christmas Child team. And so having seen the effectiveness of meeting the physical need and the ability to share the gospel, I wanted to continue to be a part of it. And that's one of the things that Operation Christmas Child does well, is also share the gospel clearly to kids in tough situations.
Yeah. So Samaritan's Purse, it's separate from Billy Graham Evangelistic Association, but it is led by Franklin Graham, who also now heads up BGA. But of course, correct. The Graham name is, evangelical royalty, so to speak. But this came from Franklin Graham's vision. Is that correct?
Well, Samaritan's Purse was initially started by Bob Pierce, the same gentleman who started World Vision. And so Bob Pierce, as he was getting into later years of his life, asked if Franklin Graham would lead the organization. And so Franklin's been leading it for many years, since the 70s. And it's fortunately, the Lord's blessed it. I think the Lord has blessed his commitment to keep the gospel and the local church at the forefront. And the ministry's grown, and our ability to help has grown.
Yeah. So Billy Graham Evangelistic Association is overtly about presenting the gospel, doing crusades, putting out printed material. Samaritan's Purse begins with offering aid, offering assistance, ministry, and that's where they get the name Samaritan, as in the Good Samaritan, and so forth. So I know there's a variety of different arms and strategies that are a part of Samaritan's Purse. Tell us a little bit about those.
Yeah, be happy to do that. So we do get our name from the parable of the Good Samaritan out of Luke 10. And so our desire, as in that story, is to be there at the time of need and to provide someone with the logistical, the healthcare, the whatever the need that they need, excuse me, but also to share the hope of gospel, the hope of Christ in the midst of that tough situation, and connect them with the local church. And so over the years, a number of programs have developed at Samaritan's Purse, but at our core, we're an international crisis response organization. Anytime you see a massive disaster globally, Samaritan's Purse is looking to respond and be there very quickly. We want to be one of the first ones on the ground. We want to serve the needs of the local community as quickly with as much excellence as possible, because when people are going through very difficult times, as we know, their hearts and their minds are opened. They're questioning life. They're approaching or questioning God, and we've got the ability to come in and remind people that God loves them, and that there are people that are concerned for them and praying for them through their difficult circumstance. So International Crisis Response will go in, we'll meet the physical need, we'll do it in partnership with the local church, and we'll be intentional about helping someone in that moment of crisis. We do the same or similar in the United States through our U.S. Disaster Relief Department. U.S. Disaster Relief is what you've seen, the trucks on the road. Those are where volunteers across the United States go and serve. Franklin announced yesterday on his Facebook, or I think it was earlier this morning on his Facebook page, that we will be responding to the California wildfires. As soon as it's safe to do so and we get approval from the government in California, we will be there to respond. Hurricane Helene is one of the largest responses at U.S. Disaster Relief, or the largest we've ever responded to. We got numbers just this week that over the course of Hurricane Helene, because there were so many volunteers, we had more than 5 times the volunteers in 2024 through U.S. Disaster Relief than we've had in previous years.
Wow.
And the majority of that is because of people in the church, the body of Christ, that came out to help their neighbor during Hurricane Helene. So that's the U.S. disaster response side of things. We also have a World Medical Mission program where we are supporting and facilitating short-term doctors that are serving in medical missionary hospitals all over the world. That program equips hospitals with medical supplies, also with post-residence, and also through temporary doctors that will provide doctors the ability to go on furlough. And there's a number of other programs as well, like Children's Heart Project, Operation Heal Our Patriots. There's a Cleft Lip program, and a number of others that are just developing programs that meet the needs. It's just places where the Lord's blessed a program that has started in the country, and it's grown and developed into a department, if you will, where Samaritan's Purse can do ongoing work around the world.
Yeah. One of the things that, Christianity, evangelical Christianity today gets a lot of criticism, and we earn a lot of it, believe me. I get that, and I see that. But one of the things I think that's overlooked is that when we have committed ourselves to Christ, when we've given ourselves to Him, there comes a burden, even a passion for helping those who are less than, or who are in need, or who are in crisis. Many of the great philanthropic organizations, disaster relief, I won't name them, but they come to our mind quickly when we think of those who step up, were started as faith-based. Over time, it is easy for those organizations to become so overwhelmed with the needs that they miss the gospel opportunities because they're stretched too thin, because leadership changes over time. But Samaritan's Purse has a unique commitment to not neglect that part. It's body and soul.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit, I know you send chaplains, I know you have follow-up, I know you bathe every activity in prayer. Tell us how the intentionality of that's demonstrated.
Well, I appreciate you asking. I believe it starts at the top with the Reverend Franklin Graham. He keeps our focus on working in and through the local church and keeps the gospel at the forefront. And so our relief efforts are always twofold. They're meeting a physical need, but also, a spiritual need as well. We do that intentionally and practically because it does require intentionality. When you're in a crisis situation, it's easy to be so focused on just meeting the physical need that you don't even sleep or take the intentional effort to engage the local church or to share the gospel. But with Samaritan's Purse, we plan that from the beginning. So we know before we go into a response that we will have chaplains responding aside our volunteers or beside our DART team members, so that there is someone there focused and intentional about meeting the spiritual needs and sharing the gospel if someone doesn't know Jesus. Again, you have to plan that in advance. And so when we deploy with U.S. Disaster Relief, the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team will have a group of chaplains that will go alongside our staff responding, whether it be California or Hurricane Helene or wherever. They will respond in tandem. The most recent responses that I was a part of on the U.S. Disaster Relief side were in Boone and Asheville. And in all those cases, we'd have a big group of, say, 50 volunteers that we're serving. The volunteers will be intentional about loving on the homeowners, and in some cases intentional about sharing the gospel. But that's not a guarantee that that's going to happen when you're mudding out a home. We will have a Billy Graham Evangelistic Rapid Response Chaplain that will come alongside and will intentionally sit down with that homeowner and just learn where they are in their faith, listen to their story, show compassion, show the love of Christ.
Yep. So what if I were a part of a local church and I have the gift of mercy. I have the gift of service.
Yeah.
And I said, when I see things unfold, whether it's a hurricane in Florida or whether something like happened in North Carolina or the fires, and I want to do something, anything, what would you tell me I can do?
First, I would say pray. I think that's one of our most underrated weapons that we all have in our ability to meet needs, is just to come before the Lord and pray for those families and those individuals that are affected by that disaster. So if we can pray, I think that's great. And also pray, Lord, how would you use me? And in many cases, as you mentioned, we're compelled in our hearts. We're made in the image of God. We've got this generosity and love written on our hearts that will pour out when we see these needs. And if you want to get involved, you can come and serve. Some people who are gifted and have a desire to serve as a chaplain can go through chaplaincy training. But in most cases, the majority of our volunteers that want to get involved are serving with their hands and doing it through U.S. Disaster Relief. Mm-hmm. And that's a process where volunteers are doing dirty work. It's the hard, dirty work, but it means a ton to the homeowners. Take Helene, for example. We were removing debris. We were taking trees off of houses. We were mudding out, taking out sheetrock insulation, just cleaning up people's homes, disinfecting and bleaching so that we could get people back into their homes or into a safe environment. California, we will be doing a lot of sifting of ashes, and it's not easy work, but it means a lot to a homeowner if a volunteer comes from outside their city, concerned about what they're going through, and is willing to sift through the ashes of their homes to help them find precious family heirlooms that will mean a lot to them. When you show that kind of love and that compassion to somebody in a difficult time, their hearts are touched in a powerful way, and their ears are open to the good news of the gospel that we're sharing at the same time.
Yep. This is very consistent with people I talk to from Samaritan's Purse. And you just did it again. Mm. And that is this. You never mentioned giving money. And a lot of organizations, the first thing they say is, write a check. You said pray. Mm. That to me is one of the distinguishing hallmarks of Samaritan's Purse. And at the same time, I'm a practical kind of guy.
Yeah.
I know what you do when you set up a field hospital, when you send a team in, when you start opening up kitchens and so forth. That is not done out of wishes and hopes. That takes real thing.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the funding opportunities and aspects.
Well, it's certainly there, and certainly are grateful for our generous donors and church partners because they facilitate our work. It's through the generosity of our donors that we're able to reach more people. When we respond to a particular location, like take Hurricane Helene, for example, again, it's through the generosity of our donors that allows us to rebuild even more houses. And so, yes, please prayerfully consider giving your finances, and anyone can do that through the Samaritan's Purse website very easily. But you're right, like we talk often at Samaritan's Purse about time, talent, resources. Resources, of course, include the financial, but we really want people to pray, and we really want people to serve and get involved with their hands and use their time and the gifts that the Lord's given them to serve their neighbor, but also to give if the Lord leads, as the Lord leads.
Yeah, and like I said, I respect the aspect that you don't start with the give request, but I just, as a pastor, I have a hard time asking for that as well, though people may question and challenge that. But the fact is, I love encouraging people who are inclined to give, who feel called to give toward organizations and institutions that are trustworthy. And I will tell you this, in my own giving, and when I give to disaster situations, because like anybody else, I see those and what can I do? I can't get on a plane and fly to California. I just don't have the bandwidth, but I can write a check. And if I'm going to write a check to any disaster relief organization, it is always Samaritan's Purse, because I know the character of the leadership. I know the accountability. I know the impact you're making on the ground because I've talked to the people and I've seen it with my own eyes. I would say this: I'm the chairman of the board of an organization called Ministry Watch, and one of the things we do is we serve philanthropists and we rate organizations in terms of their fiscal accountability and their transparency and those things. And among the highest rated organizations consistently year after year after year is Samaritan's Purse. They do what they're supposed to do. They're transparent about it. They tell you up front what's going on. And I think that ought to be something that we consider, because when we get resources that we're willing to share, whether it's time or talent or treasure, when we have that, we have a responsibility, because it's not ours, it's God's. We're just the conduit through which it flows, to make sure that from point A to point C, and we're point B, that it gets to a place in accountable fashion, an accountable way. So what do you see as, what are ongoing needs? You have crisis, and who would have guessed when the new year started just a few weeks ago that we were going to have something this is the biggest wildfire situation going on in California. Yeah. Nobody can anticipate that. There's an earthquake or a tsunami or something that's, looming on the horizon that none of us have any idea for. Are those the moments when you need to hear from us most? Or are there other things that are kind of behind the scenes that are ongoing that also we need to be praying about, considering, giving toward, and so forth?
Yeah, great question. And first of all, I would be remiss if I didn't say thank you for your confidence in us, your partnership as a church, and for the generosity of everybody who's listening, who's given to Samaritan's Purse and the pastor recently. We're grateful for that because, well, that's what makes our work possible. It's through partnership. I would say one of the things that a lot of people don't realize about Samaritan's Purse, and I think this makes us a little bit unique in the disaster response field, if you will, in particular, is Samaritan's Purse isn't asking for money and deciding if we're going to go or what we're going to do based on the money that we receive, the finances. So Franklin Graham's decision today to respond to the wildfires in California was based upon the need. And our response in the coming weeks will be facilitated by finances that have been given in months in the previous year. So we have and will always maintain, a fund that will give us ability to respond quickly to meet the need. The finances, of course, can have an impact on how long we're in a particular place or to the degree that which we respond. But the decision is made based upon need, and we're there to do it quickly. And so I would just encourage someone to not feel pressure in the moment to give, but to prayerfully consider how they can give throughout the year. I think there's two things that we really appreciate is when people give to our general fund and give us the ability to respond where most needed, as most needed. That's an extreme confidence in us as an organization, but it allows the leadership to respond quickly wherever they see a need, as they see fit. That's a wonderful thing. Number two, it's people that give regularly and are committing to build that capacity of the organization to respond quickly.
One of the things I want to kind of just close circuit on a little bit here is, if you're a pastor listening to this podcast, when a catastrophe strikes, many times people in the church will come to you and say, we want to give, we want to get involved. What do we do? And people will give money to the church that they want us to use to distribute to others. I think I saw this a little bit in Helene, in that we have to be careful when we're transferring resources in our care to others, that we act accountably as well. And often this is driven by a sense of compassion, and there's an emotional component to it. But at some point, leadership needs to come in and make sure that it is accountable and that it is being placed in the wisest positions. From my perspective, and I speak only, Brian had no idea I was going to say this, but from my perspective, one of the things I choose to do is to take the resources that we have that are not designated for something else and put them in the hands of Samaritan's Purse. We had tens of thousands of dollars given to us for the Helene thing. There were a few individual cases. I knew some pastors there. I knew of specific needs that we were able to step in and help. But the excess, we determined that we did not know, and rather than just throw money at the situation, we were going to give it to someone who was on the ground, up front, in there. And for us, that was Samaritan's Purse. Sometimes we want the thrill of being able to say, yeah, well, we went in here and did this. But sometimes in our wanting to help, we can hurt. And so I just want to kind of just give a caution out. Use wisdom in the channeling of your resources. Sometimes we get pressure at work to give to certain campaigns, and it looks good at a corporate level. There are times when I've seen church families asked to give towards something whose values run contrary to us, but there's this pressure to give in the moment and in the urgency. And so I believe we're accountable for the resources that God gives us. And I can say with confidence, Samaritan's Purse is the kind of organization that will serve the needs today that have created the passion, but they'll also serve the needs tomorrow and down the road and further on in an accountable, organized, directed way. And so I just kind of wanted to give that endorsement because I know some pastors watch this and listen to this. And in the groups that I work with, I know that sometimes we say, well, then we don't know what happens. Yeah, you can. You can figure that out, right?
Well, that's part of what I get the privilege of helping with. And so for any pastors that are listening that are in this, decision that they have to make periodically, the church engagement team that I get the privilege of being a part of, is in place to answer those questions, to provide the resources, to give updates, and to inform churches on how their giving is made a difference and how their giving's met a need, and been a part of the gospel and work through the local church. All that stuff is what we exist to do, is to encourage and equip the local church and report on how their finances have been used. I would also say to a church, genuinely, Samaritan's Purse is not looking to be someone that you give to and it's like a one and done thing. We are looking for partner churches. And so we want any church that's giving to us to see us as a partner in ministry. Like our goal genuinely is to help the church accomplish what God's called you as a church to do, which is meet the needs of your neighbors, to serve the community. And so that's part of who we are. The Great Commission is part of that, and part of the mandate of the church is to go and make disciples. And so as Samaritan's Purse, we want to help a local pastor, a local church accomplish what God's called you to do as a church. And an easy way to do that in the time of a crisis is to partner with someone that is equipped and ready and quick to respond and can help mobilize those resources or the people alongside them to meet a need very quickly in coordination with the local government.
Such an excellent word. And Brian, part of our philosophy at Life Fellowship here is that, and you use the word over again, partnership.
Yeah.
There's no need for us to go do what is already being done by people who can do it better, and can follow through and so forth. This is the we're not in competition. We are partners. We're brothers, and so to be able to make these investments with our partners and so forth, and work that is in some cases beyond the scope of a local church. It's just too big. It's too massive. But when we partner together like that, but together we're better.
Yeah.
And I think that's something I've appreciated about Samaritan's Purse and many of the other organizations that we partner with. Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for what you do. If somebody wanted to get a hold of some more information about Samaritan's Purse or how their church could get engaged with Samaritan's Purse or Operation Christmas Child, how would we direct them?
The website, SamaritansPurse.org, is a great place to start. You can also call Samaritan's Purse directly. The number's on the website. There's a group of people in our donor ministries team that would be happy to talk to you. And if you're a church, they will direct you to me or someone on our team, and we'd be happy to support you.
I got a quick bonus question for you, Brian. So the evangelistic part of the ministry, I love how you guys are going, whether it's Operation Christmas Child or whatever you guys are doing. It sounds like there's this, we're going to serve first, and then there's an evangelistic component after that, which I appreciate how there's both of those things. So my question is, how is that transition done tactfully? Like, what mistakes do you train people to avoid that other people who want to learn how to share their faith in non-weird ways? Like, what are some tips that you could give us on how to, because you don't want to just like have like, here's your family heirlooms, here's the 4 spiritual laws. Like, there's obviously like that's too quick.
Yeah.
So what could you tell us about that aspect of the ministry?
That's a really good question. That's one of those things, Josh, that honestly, we all should be grateful for the Holy Spirit. I mean, plain and simple, just being attuned and in touch and listening sensitively to the Holy Spirit as He leads us in those conversations and those opportunities. Because you are correct. When someone is going through something extremely difficult, whether it's a first world pain that we might be experiencing here today, or it's a massive crisis like what we're talking about in Sudan at the beginning of the podcast, you need someone that's quick to listen, quick to show love, to show the compassion of Christ, and to extend hope. I mean, you just have to intentionally follow the lead of the Holy Spirit and be intentional about trying to share hope in the midst of crisis. And hope is through Christ, both short-term and long-term, regardless of that difficult situation. And so looking for wise ways to do that. And when people know that you care, they'll listen to what you have to say. And so, yeah, slowness and listening and being present with people is a really important part of our work. I mean, it's a lot of what we do is a ministry of presence. U.S. Disaster Relief, it's a ministry of presence. We will physically helps people clean out their homes and get their lives back in order as best we can. But we will be present with these families and show them that we love them. And we will share why we're motivated to do it through the gospel and what we know Christ has done for us in our own lives. But you have to do that wisely, tactfully, and through the leading of the Spirit.
All right. And let me just say this. If you want somebody who knows what they're doing and is a great guy to talk to and has great stories and illustrations, you need to get a hold of Brian. So if you live in the sound of my voice in the Carolinas and so forth, this part of the country, make sure you look up Brian. He'll be a blessing to you and to your church. And you're a blessing to us because you're listening to Life Talks. And I just want you to know we appreciate that. We appreciate your feedback. I got 2 phone calls just in the last 48 hours, people that have been listening to episodes and just had some questions. Everybody wants to know about you, Josh. The mysterious man who's the producer.
The enigma.
Yes. In fact, we're going to get an episode of you before long talking about Equal Rights Institute and what you do there because I became aware it's been several years since we talked about it and it's time to refresh it.
That would be great.
Yeah. So, and we're going to be talking about other ministries that we partner with in the year to come. Keep listening to us. Will you? Tell others about us. Leave us a review wherever you get your podcast. But as always, thank you so much for listening to us here at Life Talks.